China is reshaping the very fabric of global power, and it's all happening at the world's busiest ports. Think of it as a game of monopoly. China's not just buying properties anymore, they're buying influence, one port at a time. Now here's where it gets interesting. This expansion represents a dramatic departure from China's historical focus on regional concerns, positioning Beijing as a potential challenger to established powers in the global arena. It's rather like watching your quiet neighbor suddenly start throwing parties every weekend. You begin to wonder what they're really up to. Hello and welcome. You're watching Statecraft with me, Geeta Mohan. Now, China's emergence as a global economic powerhouse has fundamentally reshaped international maritime dynamics and strategic competition. As the world's largest trading nation conducting 95% of its international trade through sea lanes, China has systematically leveraged its economic might to establish a growing network of strategic ports and bases worldwide. Unlike the United States of America, which maintains over 128 overseas military bases across 51 countries with nearly 170,000 deployed personnel at an annual cost of $30 to $50 billion, China's approach combines commercial port investments with selective military installations. The Americans have gone for the traditional approach. Think of it as the military equivalent of a full English breakfast, hearty, obvious, and everywhere you look. China, meanwhile, has opted for something more like dim sum, smaller portions but far more sophisticated, and you're not entirely sure what you're eating until it's too late. This strategy contrasts sharply with India's modest 5 overseas facilities focused on regional security, demonstrating China's broader global ambitions and sophisticated understanding of how economic influence can translate into strategic leverage. Enter President Xi Jinping in 2013 with what might be the most ambitious infrastructure project since the Romans decided to build roads everywhere, the Belt and Road Initiative, or as we like to call it, Xi's global shopping spree. President Xi Jinping's launch of the Belt and Road Initiative in 2013 marked a pivotal moment in China's global strategy. The accompanying 21st century maritime Silk Road, connecting China to Europe and the Arctic Ocean via the South China Sea and Indian Ocean, has supercharged China's overseas port investment activities.
From the Eurasian continent to Africa, the Americas, and Oceania, Belt and Road cooperation has opened up new space for global economic growth, produced new platforms for international trade and investment, and offered new ways for improving global economic governance. Indeed, this initiative has helped improve people's lives in countries involved and created more opportunities for common prosperity. What we have achieved amply demonstrates that Belt and Road cooperation has both generated new opportunities for the development of all participating countries and opened up new horizons for China's development and opening up.
Xi's personal enthusiasm for ports was rather charmingly evident during his 2017 visit to Tieshan Port in Guangxi Province. There he declared, and I quote, "We often say that to get rich, we must first build roads. But in coastal areas, to get rich, we must also first build ports." It's like a Chinese version of location, 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 but with considerably more geopolitical implications. This initiative has yielded remarkable results. As of September 2023, China had signed 70 bilateral and regional shipping agreements with 66 countries and regions, creating shipping routes and service networks covering major countries and regions worldwide. Shanghai has retained its position as the world's busiest container port for 13 consecutive years. That's longer than some governments have stayed in power. Meanwhile, several Chinese ports rank amongst the most connected. China's domestic port infrastructure provides a telling indicator of its maritime capabilities. the country has become home to the world's largest container ports, with Chinese facilities dominating global shipping connectivity rankings. This domestic strength serves as the foundation for China's overseas expansion, providing the expertise, technology, and financial resources necessary for global port development projects. Now let's talk about Djibouti, a country most people couldn't find on a map if their lives depended on it, but which has become absolutely crucial to China's global strategy. China's most significant overseas military installation is located at Djibouti's Doraleh port. Established in 2017 to support the PLA's naval anti-piracy missions in the Gulf of Aden. These operations have continued non-stop since 2008, providing China with legitimate justification for maintaining a permanent military presence in this strategically vital location. The anti-piracy mission is brilliant cover, really. It's like setting up a neighborhood watch program, except your neighborhood happens to control access to the Suez Canal. Nobody can argue with fighting pirates. It's practically a moral imperative. The Djibouti base serves multiple purposes beyond anti-piracy operations. It provides logistical support for Chinese naval vessels operating in the Indian Ocean, enables humanitarian relief operations, and offers China its first permanent military foothold in Africa. The facility's location at the mouth of the Red Sea, controlling access to the Suez Canal, makes it particularly valuable for monitoring global shipping lanes and projecting power into the Indian Ocean. It's prime real estate in the world of military strategy. Next up, Cambodia, where China has managed to establish what might be its second military facility abroad. Though both Beijing and Phnom Penh have been about as forthcoming about it as a politician asked about their expenses. The Ream naval base in Cambodia represents China's second confirmed military facility abroad, though Beijing and Phnom Penh have been reluctant to officially characterize it as a Chinese base. Originally constructed as security-related aid to Cambodia, the facility has since been confirmed by Cambodian authorities as hosting Chinese military personnel and equipment.
មានរឿងមួយដែលខ្ញុំគួរតែជម្រាបជូនអ្នកសារព័ត៌មានទាំងអស់ឲ្យបានជ្រាបថាក្នុងរយៈពេលប្រមាណជាមួយខែជាងនេះមានការឃោសនាច្រើនណាស់អំពីថាមានការត្រៀមរៀបចំដើម្បីកសាងមូលដ្ឋានយោធាបរទេសនៅក្នុងប្រទេសកម្ពុជាខ្ញុំក៏បានជម្រាបជូនបញ្ហានេះជូនដល់អាដាមមានសុនភុកនិងគណៈប្រតិភូវៀតណាមឲ្យបានជ្រាបអំពីព័ត៌មានមិនពិតហើយជាការកុហកនិងបំផ្លិចបំផ្លាញ
It's the diplomatic equivalent of "we're just good friends." Technically true, but everyone knows what's really going on. Satellite imagery has revealed Chinese naval vessels docked at the newly upgraded facility for extended periods, which is rather like claiming your friend is just popping round for tea whilst their car's been in your driveway for 3 months. The base's strategic location in the South China Sea provides China with enhanced surveillance capabilities and power projection potential throughout Southeast Asia. This development has prompted serious concerns from the US State Department regarding China's plans for exclusive control over portions of the facility. The Americans are understandably a bit miffed about this. The Ream naval base highlights China's ability to establish military facilities through diplomatic partnerships and economic assistance, avoiding the political complications associated with formal base agreements. This approach allows China to maintain plausible deniability whilst steadily expanding its military footprint. US intelligence agencies have identified numerous locations where China is reportedly considering establishing military facilities. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence's annual assessment highlighted China's pursuit of overseas military installations and access agreements in an attempt to project power and protect China's interests abroad. The potential locations read like a world traveler's bucket list: Burma or Myanmar, Cuba, Equatorial Guinea, Pakistan, Seychelles, Sri Lanka, Tajikistan, Tanzania, and the United Arab Emirates. A comprehensive study by the RAND Corporation ranked over 100 potential candidates based on desirability and feasibility. The study identified Bangladesh, Cambodia, Myanmar, and Pakistan as most likely to meet Beijing's requirements for future military facilities. Analysis by the Center for Strategic and International Studies concluded that China is most likely operating covert listening stations at 4 sites in Cuba, including 3 near Havana and 1 located just 64 kilometers west of US Naval Station Guantanamo Bay. These facilities would provide China with unprecedented intelligence gathering capabilities in America's strategic backyard, which must be keeping quite a few people in Washington, D.C. awake at night. All identified potential host nations are participants in the Belt and Road Initiative, highlighting the connection between China's economic investments and military expansion plans. Economic security and domestic regime legitimacy serve as primary drivers behind China's inevitable military reach extending beyond its shores. Now here's where China's strategy gets particularly clever. Instead of building obvious military bases that scream invasion imminent, they're investing in commercial ports that could, in theory, accommodate military vessels. China's most significant strategic advantage lies in its extensive network of commercially invested ports that possess dual-use potential. This approach allows China to maintain strategic flexibility without the political complications of formal military base agreements. When evaluating ports for potential military use, factors such as berth length and number, draft depth, deep water access, and availability of transportation networks and fueling facilities become crucial considerations. It's like house hunting, but your estate agent is the People's Liberation Army. Ports with drafts between 12 to 15 meters can accommodate most Chinese naval vessels, including destroyers at 6.5 meters draft, frigates at 6 meters, aircraft carriers at 11 meters, and cruisers at 6.6 meters. Given that oil tankers and carriers average 16 meters draft, ports capable of handling commercial shipping can typically accommodate naval vessels as well. The real leverage of Chinese overseas influence stems from varied degrees of investment and ownership in the world's busiest and most connected ports, which underpin global trade flows. China's heavy investment in strategically located ports provides significant influence over supply chains and global trade logistics, creating dependencies that extend far beyond traditional military considerations. Western governments have expressed increasing concern about China's potential development of these commercial ports into naval bases. However, the growing scrutiny could make building formal naval bases less effective for Chinese power projection, making the dual-use commercial approach more attractive. It's the geopolitical equivalent of hedging your bets. Why build a military base when you can build a commercial port that might become a military base? Rather, like buying a Swiss Army knife instead of a sword. But here's where things get a bit sticky. China's overseas port strategy extends beyond infrastructure development to encompass economic leverage through lending and investment. Unfortunately, this approach has created significant vulnerabilities for recipient nations, rather like lending money to your mate for a business venture only to discover they've spent it all on a yacht. Countries most indebted to China, including Pakistan, Kenya, Zambia, Laos, and Mongolia, are devoting more than a third of government revenue to servicing foreign debt. 2 nations, Zambia and Sri Lanka, have already defaulted, whilst others face imminent financial crisis. Pakistan's textile industry has shed millions of jobs due to electricity shortages caused by the country's inability to service foreign debt. Meanwhile, Kenya has delayed civil services salaries to preserve cash for loan repayments. It's like maxing out your credit cards to pay the mortgage, then discovering you can't afford groceries. This debt burden carries geopolitical implications. Honduras cited financial pressures when establishing diplomatic ties with China whilst severing relations with Taiwan. Pakistan's desperation to prevent blackouts led to energy deals with Russia, breaking ranks with US-led sanctions efforts. In Sri Lanka, economic collapse triggered riots that stormed the presidential palace, forcing the leader associated with Chinese loan agreements to flee the country. That's what we call a hostile takeover of government, though probably not the kind China had in mind. Research by Aid Data revealed at least $385 billion in hidden and underreported Chinese debt across 88 countries, with many nations in far worse financial conditions than previously understood. The organization discovered that Chinese loans often include clauses requiring borrowing countries to deposit foreign currency in secret escrow accounts, effectively jumping to the front of the creditor repayment line. So what does all this mean for the global balance of power? China's expanding network of strategic ports and bases represents a fundamental challenge to existing global power structures. Unlike the United States of America, which maintains extensive military infrastructure through formal alliance systems, China's approach leverages economic partnerships and commercial investments to achieve strategic objectives. The Chinese model offers several advantages over traditional military base agreements. Commercial port investments face less political resistance than military installations, provide legitimate economic benefits to host nations, and create long-term dependencies that extend beyond simple access agreements. This approach allows China to maintain strategic flexibility whilst avoiding the political complications associated with formal military alliances. However, China's strategy also faces significant challenges. Growing Western scrutiny has made recipient nations more cautious about Chinese investments, particularly those with potential military applications. The debt sustainability crisis affecting many Belt and Road participants threatens to undermine Chinese influence in key regions. Additionally, the lack of formal military alliances means China cannot rely on the same level of commitment from host nations as traditional alliance partners provide. Meanwhile, back home, India's installations in Tajikistan, Bhutan, Mauritius, Oman, and Singapore reflect a more modest but regionally coherent strategy designed to address immediate security concerns rather than global power projection. Looking ahead, China's pursuit of overseas military installations faces similar challenges to those confronted by established powers. Host nations retain ultimate sovereignty over their territory and can restrict or revoke access agreements, particularly following government changes. It's like being a tenant. No matter how much you've invested in the property, the landlord can still ask you to leave. Public opposition in host countries may limit the utility of facilities during contingencies, whilst diplomatic tensions can complicate operational planning. The timeline for China's global expansion appears ambitious yet achievable. US intelligence assessments suggest China could establish a burgeoning network of overseas bases by the end of this decade, potentially challenging American global dominance. However, this expansion will require careful navigation of political sensitivities, economic constraints, and security concerns. In other words, the world is about to become a much more interesting place, though whether that's good or bad news rather depends on where you're sitting. One thing's for certain, the age of simple geopolitics is well and truly over. Thank you for watching Statecraft.